Hi guys, and welcome to the 16th daily critique. It's gone 5 p.m. here in the UK, so I'm actually rushing to get this one done. These videos do take a fair amount of time, and actually to that end, it's great that a lot of people have responded to these videos. I've had some nice messages sent to me privately as well, but if you would be so kind as to share them more widely, that would be great. Obviously, there's a lot of work going into them, so it'd be good if more people could see these critiques. So today we're going to discuss the work of David Hunter. David did send me a short bio about himself, but he certainly takes more of a conservation angle with his images. I think he mentioned that he was keen to promote people's stewardship of the landscape, which of course is a very important idea for landscape photographers. And these images are really excellent, and slightly unusual in the sense that David has sent me two black and white images, which nobody has done yet. So the topic of this video is going to be about black and white and what they can offer you, and some of the advantages of working in black and white. And I should add that I'm not actually a black and white photographer myself. I never shoot for black and white, so you'll have to take what I say with a pinch of salt. But that being said, let's get going. So here are the four images that David sent in, and you can see a marked difference here between the style of these images and those of the previous photographers that we've had, in that these are quite understated images, and very nice too. So we'll have a look at them in Photoshop one by one, and we'll start with this one, a lone tree growing on a scree slope. You've got some, I assume, iron oxide colours coming into what's possibly volcanic sediments here. I'm not exactly sure on the nature of this photograph, but a lovely range of colours working through here. I mean, you could almost make abstracts just from the colours in the sediments here. So that colour contrast is beautiful by itself. And then you've got this idea of nature sort of competing, or a tree surviving in wild circumstances on very difficult terrain. So it's that nature against Mother Earth kind of idea, that is quite a popular idea in photography, but difficult to find compositions quite as beautiful as this to play out that idea. If I do my usual drawing on the composition here, I just love the combination of these two lines here. That really is quite beautiful. And combine that with the colours, and you have a nice image already, but it just needs that focal point, and the tree provides that. A really beautiful tree in itself, looks quite windswept, so it fits in nicely with the theme of the image, so very, very coherent from an ideas perspective. I will just discuss the detail of this tree and the bush off to the right here. I'd love to see a solitary tree. It actually wasn't on its own. There's this little bush, but there's also another one that David has removed. So here is the original, and he's done an amount of contrast and color work that's not dissimilar to what I might do with a shot like this, to be honest. So I think the way he's edited it is within the realm of reason, but I do think he's made the tree a bit too hot, a bit too saturated. This bush is becoming really quite nuclear. And whilst that does help them to stand out, I think they actually don't need that help, because the green colour only exists there, and so even in this much more subtle original, the tree is still the very clear focal point. And if you're going to get rid of that tree, I'd get rid of that little bush as well, just to simplify things a bit. But a really, really nice shot, that one. Just that minor editing issue in that top right hand corner. Now onto this shot of what I assume are aspens. I'm afraid I'm not entirely au fait with the trees in America, but I think these are aspens. Really lovely, simple image showing what beautiful trees these are in autumn. I love having both the orange and yellow trees together. Quite often when I see images of aspens, it's like a wall of yellow, and it's great to have this color separation. Again, I'll show you the original. David just sent me JPEGs actually, so I can't say for sure that this is the original. But obviously there's a fair bit of underexposure here, possibly to make sure that he's protected the highlights in some of the sunlit leaves here. But I think you could deal with another full stop of exposure before blowing any of those highlights. The edit here is very nice. I'd probably just try and rebalance tonally across the width of the image to complete the idea of symmetry here. There's two things that jump out at me. One is that the left hand side seems slightly brighter, thanks in part to this this tree at the back here, which has got more direct sunlight on it, whereas it's more shadowed off here to the right. But also this tree trunk is a lot brighter than the others, so it does draw my eye more to this left hand side, so it creates a slight sense of asymmetry with what is quite a symmetrically intended shot, I believe. So I would just try and make a small adjustment there. So I'll just do a quick brightening curve here and drag a gradient across. And that simple change, that just helps to correct that for me. These two highlights down here on the left, they're a bit annoying. I would tone them down. When I have distractions like this that exist naturally in an image, I'll quite often target them with an adjustment just to make them darker so that they jump out less than they do here. I wouldn't necessarily totally remove them because the problem is their brightness, not that they're necessarily there at all. But another really nice shot, more illustrative, I guess, rather than interpretive, but very nice all the same. Okay, now onto the meat of this video, the black and whites. So I guess I'll show you the color version first. So you can see that David is shooting what I assume is sunlight here, or the sun is dipped behind a half cloud. You can see there's some cirrus in the air, but very flat light and relatively little definition. There's a decent color contrast between the blue sky and the yellow sands, but other than that, there's not really much tonally to work with, and yet we have this lovely structure to the image. I'm not entirely sure about this curve at the bottom as a subject. Maybe there's just a bit too much contrast in there, but everything else about the image is beautiful. Lovely flowing lines. That is, of course, one of the benefits of shooting sand dunes, which I've never been able to do myself, but I see lots of beautiful images coming out of sand dune landscapes, and this is certainly one of them. The black and white image is much more effective than the original color image, though, because you can bring in all this contrast and texture and enhance those lines that were naturally there. So it allows you to create a much more impactful image in this case. But aside from that, you can do a lot more with black and white because it doesn't look real. Nobody looks at a black and white and expects the landscape to be black and white, and that does allow you to work tonally in ways that you just can't with a color image. So you could, for example, make the sky almost black and it wouldn't necessarily look wrong, whereas were you to make these kind of tonal adjustments to a color image, everything starts to fall apart. So if I do a really extreme contrast adjustment here to start to try and bring out some of those textures, it just starts to look really crazy. And you can switch so that it's only affecting the colors and have a play around, but you're always fighting against the fact that this is a color image, and therefore it's always going to look fairly natural and illustrative, and yet you're trying to apply a massive edit to it. So often color images just can't handle that kind of edit, even if you would want to, which most color photographers probably wouldn't. Whereas black and white, you have a bit more freedom, and that allows you to create more dramatic images in otherwise challenging conditions. And David's done a great job here. Couple of distractions in these contrails. I would clone those out myself. I don't do too much cloning, but contrails are one of the things that I probably would tidy up, because that just competes too much with everything that's beautiful about this image. You could argue that there's a couple of little distractions here that are worth cloning out, and maybe this bottom corner does need addressing in some way, but actually they're minor distractions, and I quite like the integrity of images that don't have these corrections. I almost like to see the flaws, so yeah, like that one. And this one's really interesting as well. If we look at the original color image and I criticize the composition here, then I start going, well, you've got this open area at the top and you've got this black area on the left, and so there's an imbalance right at the top of the frame that kind of draws your attention to the top of the image where you don't want it to go. And of course what David's done immediately is just crop that out, which is exactly how you should solve that problem. But more than that, the conditions here are very nice, and the color palette is perfectly harmonious. But the color doesn't really add anything, and this saturation in the grass arguably draws your eye to the ground rather than the tree, which is much more monotone. So yeah, that doesn't help, because of course you want the attention to go purely on the tree, and I'm not sure that the color really helps that. And switching to black and white just helps to exaggerate that structure. You forget about what's happening on the ground, or focus more on this branch, which is certainly less noticeable in the color version. And the black and white also helps the figure to stand out. So all in all, this conversion and this edit is incredibly effective at getting this idea of this man standing beneath an old wizened tree. So that's really why the edit is so effective. It just helps the ideas shine through, and you don't have this color competing with the main idea of the image and the main structure of the image. So black and white can be a great tool in your arsenal for doing that kind of thing. What I would say is some people just convert to black and white because they think that's the arty thing to do. And here you can see two very specific examples of where black and white has really added to the images. So it's not a matter of just taking photos and converting to black and white. It's a matter of recognizing which scenes are going to work brilliantly in black and white. So hopefully you found that helpful, and thank you very much, David, for sending that set of images in.